Have you ever considered the landmark that was left by the ancients? This is a very interesting thing that I never really contemplated for myself very clearly, but over the last few months I've been doing exactly that. To know the landmark that was left and also to not forget about it. So what is this landmark and where did I actually take this quotation from? Well, I paraphrased it, but it is actually from Proverbs in the Bible, where just a little sentence said that you should not forsake the landmark of the fathers, which is basically the people that came before us. A landmark. They left a landmark, right? Now, normally when we think of a landmark, we might think of a physical sign that says to us, okay, if you go in this direction, well, you end up there as a landmark. Or there's like a direction just on top of the ground that says this right here is about this area, it explains the area. Those all could be considered landmarks, but here we're talking about a very spiritual thing, the way I see it at least. And I wanted to share it with you today because perhaps it can help you out on your journey. This landmark of the ancients, we could say, is the scriptures of the world. So then you have the Bible, you have the Bhagavad Gita, you have other stuff in Hinduism, you have the Dhammapada from Buddhism, you have the Quran from Islam, and you have also Sufi religions. Like, there's so many different religions out here on the planet, but they all deal in developing spiritual awareness, and they were written many times, in many cases, thousands of years ago. The Bible in that sense is actually pretty recent, but if you go to stuff from Hinduism, scriptures there, they might be even thousands upon thousands of more older. That didn't come out right. they are like thousands of years even older than the Bible, basically. So those are the landmark. They are a landmark meant to develop spiritual awareness for all of humanity for the ages to come. Now, if we forsake the landmark, if we don't know about this from this angle, what tends to happen is that people don't take the time to actually study any of it. And that's very interesting because most people, sadly, they have a sort of preconceived notion that certain scriptures are not worth reading, or because of their religion they dismiss other people's religions. Throughout the years, throughout the centuries, there have been so much conflicts, wars, violence all over religion, because people are not open-minded enough to consider that all the religions of the world ultimately deal with just one main point, which is to develop spiritual awareness. There's actually no need for these conflicts, but humanity, depending on their state of consciousness itself, either perceives it this way as a way of unity, or they perceive it as a way of division, of conflict, of fighting against someone else's religion, because it explains and approaches spiritual awareness from a slightly different angle. But all these books ultimately talk about God. So the main point of the books, of the religions, the scriptures, is to know God. So to forget about this landmark and the way it works is to be in conflict potentially with other people in this sense. So what I advise people to do, if you really want to develop your own spiritual awareness more and more with the time you have on planet Earth, is to use every single day of your life to study them, to contemplate what they are trying to teach you, to meditate upon them, to seek the meaning behind the words that you read to the depths of your own soul. And this can be done by quieting the mind. Meditation remains one of the main methods initially in order to do this, and ultimately through enough practice you reach a point that you remain calm mostly throughout your day, whether you meditate or not. That is the goal, because once you reach that state, you know that you can communicate with deeper parts of reality automatically in order to find the meaning behind the words you're reading. So as you study every day from these books, and it doesn't have to be very long necessarily. Some people, they spend hours upon hours meditating. I once heard about this story of some yogi that was from India, I think, and he apparently meditated for like 20 hours a day. Well, even to me, that sounds pretty extreme, but also fascinating. But personally, right now, that's not really in my interest either, to be meditating for that long and only spend 4 hours of my day maybe being involved in physical things. But the main point is, if you even spend an hour a day after work or before you go to work, especially before you go to work, before you start the day, that's actually best, is you study some spiritual scripture that has meaning to you, and then the goal is to carry that meaning with you throughout your day. So it means you have it going on in your thoughts, in your heart, your mind. You think about it as you go through your day and what the meaning is to you, what it actually taught you. And then you can learn to adjust your behavior according to the divine wisdom that you have received. That is something I've particularly been working with for the last 2 months now. I've never done it to this extreme, but I realized that's what I gotta do, in my case at least, is to study every day, sometimes for a couple hours actually in my case, these ancient scriptures, and then meditate upon them. And then as I do other stuff eventually afterwards, it's like I'm constantly aware of what I learned and adjust my behavior according to it. So you be confronted with all kinds of stuff throughout your waking hours that may be negative, that may be not as harmonious as you would like. But then to remember, what did the ancients try to teach us about life, and to overcome that negativity that might arise within you as well because of the situations that you witness. That's the goal. That's actually really truly growing spiritually if you do that. If you spend your time every day like this, then you will grow spiritually and awaken to deeper and deeper truths of your own being. You'll develop your intuition more effectively, because this is also how you want to study these scriptures, is to bear your intuition on them. You don't just read them and intellectually think about them, but you actually want to use your intuition to feel the meaning behind the words. This is a very subtle difference of studying anything. It's something that I have naturally been doing throughout my life, but it was only brought to me, to my conscious awareness, as I was a little older. A couple years ago, basically in my late 20s, early 30s, and I've said this before, I entered into a vision. I received a vision and I was asked, I would say by God. People could say Christ as well, by Jesus Christ. I mean, it was a being that came to me in a vision, and that simply asked me how I would understand his revelation as they would come to me. And my answer intuitively was that I would not just listen to his words, but I would feel the meaning behind the words. And this is what I mean when you read these ancient scriptures. This landmark that was left by the ancients is to not just read the words, but to feel the meaning behind the words. And the only way you can do that is through your intuition. So if initially you notice as you try this, you cannot really feel the meaning, well, you just have to keep practicing it, especially if your mind is not calm. Because the calmer you are, the easier this becomes. You can sense what these scriptures are trying to tell you, and then you can also sense how you should probably adjust your own behavior in certain areas, in certain situations where you might be missing the mark entirely. Because there's so much great knowledge to be found in these books that deal with spiritual awareness and the development of spiritual awareness, that it might be overwhelming initially to realize how much stuff we are doing that is in complete contradiction to the wisdom that was left behind. But then you realize, okay, it's a matter of me adjusting myself, growing in this direction, and it happens through a process, step by step. So if you improve yourself every day through these studies, then you're on the right track. But if you're like so many people that might be aware of these scriptures and that might even have read them, but then they completely forget about the message that is in them. So they don't really adjust anything according to what they were taught. There's no spiritual growth there for those people. Because more often than not, they're just simply living through the senses, living through the ego, living through the limited perspectives of this dimension alone. Spiritual awareness deals with what lies beyond the physical realm. Spiritual awareness shows us that there is more than just the physical realm. This is not just a theory at that point. Through spiritual awareness, you will be aware literally from first-person experience, from visions, in that manner that there is more to you than meets the eye. So we should not dismiss or forsake the landmark. Do you understand? So it doesn't really matter what religion you're following or what calls out to you, because it can come in many different ways. People have many different interests. Some are more interested in Christianity, others are more interested in Buddhism, others in Hinduism, others in Islam. It really doesn't matter. It's just about you realizing that they all are trying to at least teach you to develop your own spiritual awareness. And from that point you see the unity behind all religions itself. Because in order to know God, to sense God, to communicate with God's cosmic consciousness, that all happens spiritually. And the gateway towards spiritual knowledge and wisdom is through the intuition of your own soul. That is the portal, you could say, through which God can and will communicate to you. If you've developed your intuition enough, you reach a point that when you face certain situations throughout your physical journey that seem to be difficult to you, you can indeed ask in the depths of your heart for a solution, for guidance from God, and He will answer through your intuition. They will become a strong feeling that comes over you, that you can sense through your heart. Do this, do that, look at it this way. That's happened to me many times as of late in general. If I want to contemplate something, it's like I can hold almost a conversation with God inside my consciousness, where I first convey, or verbally, well, not verbally physically, but mentally, I put into words what I'm facing, what I'm dealing with, what I might be struggling with, and then I sort of, you could say, dissect the situation spiritually, and I learn to perceive it from a different angle that is better, that is more conducive to my own growth, that is more uplifting, more useful overall. But if you keep your intuition away from these situations, then you might only see one particular angle from which you can look at it, and that angle might not be the most uplifting at all. Because that's what happens usually when we only perceive things physically speaking, from a purely physical point of view. There have been so many things in my life that from a purely physical point of view could be considered almost terrible, like very tragic and sad. And I know I'm not the only person that has gone through tragic things while he is here on this planet. But the thing is, if I only perceived it physically, I would only see it as a tragedy, and I would never really be able to learn or grow because of the situation. But then I bear my spiritual wisdom on it, and I perceive it in a totally different manner that has actually strengthened me. That has made me realize, even though certain things have been very tragic and dark and sad and negative, they have actually taught me a great lesson. They have helped develop my soul into even greater unity with God. It actually inspired and sparked in me this need, this desire to unite with God, to overcome all the negatives of physicality itself. And in combination with that, I keep studying the ancient scriptures as well, because when you actually open up your mind far enough, as I have done, I notice that many of these ancient scriptures talk about so many things that still happen to us even in this day and age. So they talked about universal events and experiences that a human being, you and I, will all go through sooner or later in different times of our lives. And then to know beforehand how to deal with them in an effective manner through spiritual awareness is actually incredibly useful. It will just take away so much suffering that would otherwise be there through us struggling our ways through negative events potentially. Because no matter what happened to us, the ultimate destiny of the soul is to be united with God. And to know this, because you've developed your spiritual awareness through study and contemplation, is to become totally free to eventually reach a state you become totally free of all the suffering that otherwise might have held you back. So it is up to us ourselves, now that we know this, is this worth pursuing or not? Do I have the desire through my heart and soul to want to know God, to unite with God, to overcome all the negativity of physicality, yes or no? If it is not there, then you're probably going to forsake the landmark left by the ancients. But if you do not forsake it, if you say, yes, I can feel a desire, you will automatically be compelled to make use of this landmark, to actually fall in love with the ancient wisdom, the ancient guidance that was left pretty much, you could say, for all of eternity. The only time that these landmarks would vanish is if people, for some reason, decide to destroy them. For example, the idea of destroying the Bible forever, that it no longer exists, nobody knows about it at some point by then. So far, for thousands of years, this has not been the case and probably will never be the case. So instead of just following these religions blindly without spiritual awareness for yourself, use them the way they were meant to be used, in order to develop in yourself spiritual awareness so that you could overcome the bounds of limitation, the bondage of the flesh. The bounds of physicality would be overcome through spiritual awareness. So don't dismiss it. No matter where you are in life, no matter where your interest in lies concerning spiritual things, use them to develop yourself. And then you will always be on path to greater growth and awareness and unity, ultimately with God. That is ultimately what it's all about. If we forsake it, we are being ignorant. You could say we're being dumb, but we're just being ignorant because we are all spiritual children. So do not forsake it, but make use of it and then watch what happens. You will overcome your own suffering. You will start to be able to perceive beyond the suffering. Do not just see it as suffering, but to see actually how it can and has helped you to become a wiser, stronger person in general. And how it has developed your soul. You see, physically we develop through experiences, but the soul also develops itself through experiences in a much different way usually, because to the soul that you really are, physicality cannot really touch you. So no matter how tragic anything has been, it has never been able to touch you. This is why in the Bhagavad Gita they said, the person who kills and thinks he can kill is wrong, and the person who is killed and thinks they got killed is also wrong, because nobody can touch the real self, which is the soul. See, the act of that killing is only a physical activity, a physical phenomenon. But there lies things behind and beyond the physical, which is the spiritual realms, the spiritual nature of existence. It cannot be touched by physical things at all. And the more you contemplate these things, the more you will be able to overcome your own suffering. The more you take out that sting, that painful sting that normally keeps us in bondage to this world, where we can only perceive the stinging pain of the suffering. But then we realize spiritual awareness has taught me that I'm not just a physical being, therefore I do not have to suffer any longer. And this is in combination with your own visions and revelations that will occur inside your own soul. It will only make sense by then. If you have not had the visions or any experiences of yourself, then it still might sound bizarre. It might sound like, oh, they're just dismissing suffering, they're pretending there's no suffering. No. This is no pretending. This is dealing with an actual awareness that goes beyond the suffering of physical life. So that to me is what the landmark of the ancients was all about. That we should not forsake and forget what they tried to teach us thousands of years ago, that they put into books, so that even now, in this day and age, and many ages yet to come, people can take the time to overcome their own suffering and find the way out of it. Find the way to freedom into the kingdom of God, which is ultimately spiritual. And in order to experience the spiritual kingdom, what do you need? Spiritual awareness. Because if you would be taken into God's kingdom right now, which you actually have been to a certain degree every single night when you go to sleep. If spiritual awareness is lacking, then even if you wake up, you cannot understand the symbolism that might have occurred in those dreams, in those spiritual realms already, in those visions. So the more you develop your spiritual awareness, the more you will understand the meaning of the symbolism behind those dreams and visions that you have. And at other times you will even consciously be aware in those realms. And then it becomes really fascinating. I've already talked about this many times throughout my videos. But when you become lucid, then you truly will have evidence for yourself that you are not just a physical body. It's absolutely wonderful.